Welcome back, Patriots, for another surprising episode of The Bald Brad Show, where today we are jumping into the White House press briefing, our bread and butter, baby, where Donald Trump's White House press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, brings down the haymakers on the reporters. Now, we know how she works. She likes to get in there a little bit sneaky. She'll throw a couple body shots and just bam! Right there in the jaw, right there in the kisser, she brings it. So we have her today. This is breaking, folks. March 17th. We are live right now. Good to see all the Patriots in the chat. I know you weren't ready for this one, but somehow, just like Karoline, we come out guns swinging, baby. With that being said, support us, but hit that like button. Smash the like button for the show, boys and girls. With that being said, let's roll it. We got Deucey. We got Ed.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon.
Ooh, she has
Happy
the green
Monday.
on.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
You too.
I see a lot of us are very festive in our green. Peter Ducey, I like it. First today, I want to address the devastating tornadoes and storms that have impacted many states throughout the South and the Midwest. As of this morning, more than 40 innocent lives have been lost, and many communities have been totally destroyed. The president has been actively monitoring the situation, and the Trump administration is engaged with governors and local officials to restore affected communities and livelihoods. Everyone impacted is in our prayers, and President Trump is fully prepared to assist state and local officials as they recover from the horrific damage. The president has had a very busy weekend, making our country and the world a much safer place. President Trump ordered decisive military action against the Houthi terrorists in Yemen. These Houthi terrorists have engaged in piracy, violence, and terrorism against American ships for years under the Biden administration, costing billions of dollars and putting innocent lives at risk.
I still can't get over this picture of Trump. Trump with the broadcast headset on. Everybody get on Channel 4, boys. Channel 4, everybody log on. You're about to see some crazy shit. Everybody, I hope you didn't have breakfast, because Daddy's gonna drop some bombs. Whose bomb do you think's bigger? My bomb or Joey's bomb? And not the bomb he makes in his diaper. Pete, is that you laughing hysterically? Pete, are you in the other room?
Joe Biden's pathetic weakness invited these unacceptable attacks. But there's a new sheriff in town, and his name is Donald Trump. And the world is officially on notice.
That's right.
America has a commander-in-chief whose peace-through-strength approach is unwavering and should not be tested. As the president said, no terrorist force will stop American commercial and naval vessels from freely sailing throughout the world. Houthi terrorists and their Iranian backers should not cross President Trump again. And the president...
I want to point out that I've been asking for this type of language for 4 years from the Biden administration. I said, you got to do something. You can't just come out and say, stop doing that. You shouldn't do that anymore. If you cross that line, we're going to come at you. Donald Trump dropped some bombs on these guys, and then he comes out and says, I'm coming for you, not anymore. He led with action and then words. Absolutely love it.
The president has made that clear today.
That's what we needed.
On another important matter, President Trump signed a proclamation invoking the Alien Enemies Act regarding the invasion of the United States by the foreign terrorist organization Tren de Aragua. At the president's direction, Department of Homeland Security carried out a counter-terrorism operation deporting nearly 200 violent Tren de Aragua terrorists, which will save countless American lives. Thanks to the great work of the Department of State, these heinous monsters were extracted and removed to El Salvador.
Careful, Caroline. I just want to preface this. The left says we can't call them animals or monsters. No, we've been down this road before. 2016. Remember when Donald Trump called MS-13 violent gang members animals? And then the left, the Democrats go, how could you do that? How could you call them animals? They're just immigrants. No, they're violent gang members. They'll cut off your head and use it as a soup bowl.
Well, they will no longer be able to pose any threats to the American public. Tren de Aragua is one of the most ruthless terrorist gangs in the world. and they are responsible for some of the most heinous crimes that have occurred in our nation's history in recent years.
Correct.
Including the savage murders of beautiful Laken Riley and Jocelyn Nungray. President Trump promised Laken and Jocelyn's families during his campaign that he would demand justice for their beautiful girls, and that's exactly what he did. As the president acknowledged during his inaugural address on January 20th, he pledged to invoke this act, and he has no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions. President Trump will continue his historic efforts to seal the border and prevent these illegal invaders from coming here in the first place. As the New York Times is acknowledged over the weekend, President Trump's policies are working. Here's how the Times summed it up. Illegal crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border are down to their lowest level in decades. Once crowded migrant shelters are empty. Instead of heading north, people stranded in Mexico are starting to return home in bigger numbers.
We called that out late last week about how the migrants are going back to Colombia, Venezuela, all these other countries. And by the way, Donald Trump's sending in Navy ships now down there. Donald Trump sending Navy ships down near the border to get more control over it. I absolutely love what's going on with Donald Trump and how he's handling the border, securing it, because it's making Americans safe again. And it's what? That's what government's for, is to protect its citizens.
The border is almost unrecognizable from just a couple of years ago, when hundreds of thousands of people from around the world were crossing into the United States every month in scenes of chaos and upheaval. This is the Trump effect in action.
Damn
and
right,
again,
baby.
those are the words from the New York Times.
Damn right,
We
baby.
didn't need a border security bill. We just needed President Trump. All of these actions taken together are contributing to a wave of optimism about the direction of our great country. According to brand new polling from NBC News, more registered voters say the United States is heading in the right direction than at any point since early 2004.
You know that's pissing the left off. You know, with their Trump derangement syndrome, their heads spinning around like the Exorcist.
Americans support President Trump's common sense approach that's getting our country back on track in record time. Meanwhile, the president's critics can't say the same. That same new NBC poll also found that the Democrat Party has reached an all-time low in popularity. It turns out when you let your hatred of President Trump get in the way of doing what is best for America, the people reject you. Who would have thought?
It's you for 1 second. Bass, take it in. Everybody take it in, and it feels good. You know, something I didn't mention in this morning's podcast, if you didn't know, we do have an hour-long podcast where we go over a bunch of different news in an hour. I think partially this has to do with the fact that now that Doge is in place, they don't really have the funding to go out and pay off a bunch of these people to skew these poll numbers anymore. I think that might have something to do with it. I'm not saying that's the biggest variable in all of this, but a little bit of a conspiracy theory on my part. I think that they just don't have the money. And I think a lot of this was fabricated. Well, we know a lot of this was fabricated because of what we're seeing coming out from Doge, that everything from the trans movement to the LGBTQ plus movement to the Black Lives Matter to Antifa movement, all that stuff was completely bought off and paid for by all of us taxpayers and George Soros.
Can't say the same. That same new NBC poll also found that the Democrat Party has reached an all-time low in popularity. It turns out when you let your hatred of President Trump get in the way of doing what is best for America, the people reject you. Who would have thought? Joining us today in our new media seat is Kelly Meyer. She is a White House correspondent with News Nation. News Nation started in 2021 and is one of America's fastest growing cable news networks with a focus on news for all of America.
I thought this is supposed to be a new media seat. Why are you choosing on a White House correspondent that's already in the room? I mean, hell, there's people like me that want to get in there. That part I don't understand. That's twice now. I'm a little frustrated because last week 2 weeks ago, she had the Daily Wire, who's a White House correspondent already, meaning she's already in the room. And now you got this broad coming up, nothing against her, but she's already a White House correspondent. This is supposed to be for new media outlets like ours and others to get in that room as new people that are able to bring questions out the American people have. I don't know. I'm not liking this. It's not new media. I get that the idea of the new media is the podcasters and stuff like the Daily Wire. Again, I get it. But you're already choosing somebody that's a White House correspondent that's already in the room. That doesn't make sense to me.
It's part of a larger ecosystem. Nexstar, which is home to News Nation, the political website The Hill, the broadcast network The CW, and local Nexstar stations. With that, kick us off, please, Kelly.
Thank you, Karoline. What do you say to Americans who want safe streets but are concerned due process is being violated?
The president is using every lever of his executive authority and his constitutional authority within the bounds of the immigration laws of our country to ensure that our streets are safer for law-abiding American citizens. And this administration is focused on detaining, arresting, and deporting illegal criminal aliens. And as you saw this past weekend, the president used his authority under the Alien Enemies Act to deport foreign terrorists. Tren de Aragua is now a designated foreign terrorist organization. And as I said, there were nearly 200 Tren de Aragua members who were sent to El Salvador this weekend. Countless lives will be saved because of this action. And if you talk to the families, the Angel families, as I mentioned, Blake and Riley and Jocelyn Nungray, they understand the grave cost of life at the hands of these illegal terrorists. And the president is proud to deliver on that promise for them.
And just to follow up on that, this will be challenged later today in the courts. Does the president, does this allow him to defy the court order without having this the checks and balances and the separation of power?
No. In fact, this administration acted within the confines of the law, again, within the president's constitutional authority and under the authority granted to him under the Alien Enemies Act. We are quite confident in that, and we are wholly confident that we are going to win this case in court. Peter.
Thank you, Karoline.
Here we go, folks. Everybody buckle up. We got the man, the myth, the legend, Peter Doocy of Fox News, going up against Trump's White House press secretary, Karoline Leavitt. Here we go.
You guys can't send 200 Tren de Aragua terrorists at a time to El Salvador. Where are you going to send them instead?
It's a very good question. You'd have to ask the courts and the people on the left who are trying to fight this administration for doing the business that this president sought out to do, which is to deport these foreign terrorists. And we're very grateful to President Bukele and to El Salvador for accepting these heinous monsters where they will face justice.
And
I know right where to send them. Why don't you send them to all the Democrats that want to have these people here in the first place? Hey, open the doors. You want to have open borders? Open your house then and let these people live with you. Matter of fact, go on a nice date with your wife or your husband and let these guys take care of your kids. Oh, no, you should not have a problem with that. And if you don't want to let them in into your house, let's go ahead and invite them to Joey's house in Delaware. He let all of them in here. Might as well. Look, they're great people. They're looking for a better life. Look, they're looking just to change themselves. They're better than Americans, we're told by the Democrat Party and progressive left. Let them live with you then. We all know what happened. They're not going to. They don't have enough space. They don't have enough room is what we're told. They don't have the money to take care of them.
if these guys are terrorists at war with the United States, is President Trump considering anything more lethal to address them than just sticking them on a plane somewhere else?
Well, it sounded like you had a little bit of curiosity in the premise of your question, so I want to address it. These are designated foreign terrorists. The president signed a proclamation on February 20th, 2025, designating TDA as a foreign terrorist organization that was in consultation with the Attorney General and the Secretary of Treasury. That was pursuant to 8 U.S. Code 1189. The president has the right to do that. And I think nobody would argue that Tren de Aragua should be designated a foreign terrorist organization. If you want to have that argument, I'm happy to do it. These are heinous monsters, rapists, murderers, kidnappers, sexual assaulters, predators who have no right to be in this country, and they must be held accountable.
And something that
the left doesn't want them accountable. We've seen clip after clip. The progressive left and the Democrat Party want these guys here. The Democrats love crime. They love homelessness. They love the drugs. They love gangs like MS-13, the Latin Kings, the whole gambit. They love this stuff, folks. And how do we know that? It's because they vote with their feet. They say that they don't. In some cases, they say that they do, like we saw in Cal State Long Beach, that prior clip with James Klug. Bonkers.
different. There is now a member of the European Parliament from France who does not think the U.S. represents the values of the Statue of Liberty anymore. They want the Statue of Liberty back. So is President Trump going to send the Statue of Liberty back to France.
Give it to him! Get it the hell out of here! I don't want it!
Absolutely not. And my advice to that unnamed low-level French politician would be to remind them that it's only because of the United States of America that the French are not speaking German right now. So they should be very grateful to our great country.
Baby!
Kelly.
Boom! Just the people's elbow coming down, you know what I'm saying? They have a little bit of history coming back, and she's going, hey, French! Fuku slam with the bitch! She's coming out swinging. Did I not warn you at the head of time, folks? I told you. She'll throw a couple body shots. Nothing too serious. Just trying to more or less warm herself up and kind of just lean into a few. But just boom! Just a rabbit punch right in the jaw. Just really quick. Just a little stunned and phased. And then you got to get back up. And just a couple more bodies. She knows what she's doing.
Is the administration prepared to give the court what it wants in terms of the time of the flights that departed, that went to El Salvador, and some of those details that the judge is asking for in trying to determine the timing? Clearly, the 5 named individuals were not deported.
That's
in
right.
Compliance. But looking more broadly, wanting to know about the timing of flights and so forth, because the verbal order did say turn around the flights if there's an issue. So is the administration prepared to provide that information?
I'm prepared to provide it right now. All of the planes that were subject to the written order, the judge's written order, took off before the order was entered in the courtroom on Saturday. And the administration will, of course, be happily answering all of those questions that the judge poses in court later today.
And for people who have due process questions about making certain that there wasn't anyone who was swept up who did not meet the criteria that you laid out, is there a way for the administration to provide more detail about how that was determined, who the individuals were that met this deportation order?
Yes, I can assure the American people that Customs and Border Patrol and ICE and the Department of Homeland Security are sure about the identities of the individuals who were on these planes and the threat that they pose to our homeland. They take this incredibly seriously. They are putting their lives on the line to deport these designated terrorists from our country, and they should be trusted to do that. And that's exactly what the American people elected this president to do.
Isn't it wild that these reporters have more concern about Donald Trump deporting violent gang members that have murdered, raped, and killed people than they actually do about veterans that are living on the streets? There's no conversation about those people. Hey, what are you going to do about the homeless? Hey, how are we going to feed those that are starving and those that are the unclothed? How are we going to help those Americans out? They're more concerned, as you've seen, and it's been a constant theme with Barack Obama's administration, Joe Biden's administration. They love questioning and taking care of those that aren't Americans first, whether that's through their form of their questions or by the way that they vote, folks. The Democrats, I told you, they love this stuff, folks. They love making sure you're second-class citizens in your own country. They won't ever change. They will not change. They haven't changed. It's just insanity at the end of the day with that party.
Thanks, Caroline. Just to follow up on that then, so you're saying definitively that the administration can prove everyone that was put on those flights to El Salvador was either a member of Tren de Agua, MS-13, or some other entity?
We've already provided the breakdown in the effort of transparency about the 261 illegal aliens who were deported. 137 of those were deported under the Alien Enemies Act. 101 of those were Venezuelans removed via Title VIII, which, as you know, are just regular immigration proceedings. And 23 of them were MS-13 Salvadorian gang members. There were also 2 MS-13 ringleaders as part of that group of 23 who President Bukele particularly expressed his gratitude for their return so he can demand justice in his home country. Jennifer.
What criteria, though, other than, say, tattoos or maybe being in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Or wearing people's teeth as necklaces, having a whole kitchen full of endless skulls to use as cereal bowls. Like, what else can you maybe give us other than maybe the photos and the video of them raping and killing a bunch of people, the dead bodies buried in their backyard, the massive amount of fentanyl that's in the shed in the backyard? Hey, is there anything else possibly, Caroline, you can give us that's maybe some proof, some evidence that these people are who they say they are? Fuck, Jesus. Other than the tattoos that are a dead giveaway, you know, the mailings that they have, the orale homie, like maybe those types of things. Is there anything else you could possibly add that could maybe give them a credibility to their street cred.
Are they using to determine that someone is actually a member of one of these organizations?
Intelligence and the men and women on the ground in the interior of our country who are finally being allowed to do their jobs. Their hands were tied under the previous administration. And as I said, they take their jobs very seriously. They should be trusted and respected by the American public with this operation. And of course, as I said to Kelly, the administration will provide all details to the questions that the court poses. Jennifer.
It's remarkable that the press is all of a sudden so concerned about who's being deported rather than actually being before who was concerned with who is coming to the country. They're more concerned about Donald Trump vetting violent gang members, again, that fucking murdered people and raped children, than they were these people coming into the country. I don't mean to cuss, but I'm sorry. It's a little bit baffling and a little bit of a double standard here that you're concerned about. Is every single person, are we sure that they were Trende Agua? Give me some water, please. You weren't concerned about how they came in and when they came in, about those people being vetted. Unbelievable. It's just what? Freaking Joe Biden lets in terrorists. Thousands of them. It's just not a big deal. No vetting process there. But when Donald Trump's deport these violent people to go into prison in El Salvador, well, all of a sudden, we're definitely on our journalism now. Now we all wants to be investigators. Now we're going back to the old school book of how we do our jobs. Amazing.
One more follow-up on that. Can you say how much the U.S. is paying El Salvador to imprison these Venezuelans?
I heard
and
discount.
Then a different question on Russia. I was wondering if you could give us an update on the ceasefire negotiations, and is there anything you can share on the list that Putin passed along to President Trump for the things he's requesting?
Sure. To your first question, it was approximately $6 million to El Salvador for the detention of these foreign terrorists. And I would point out that is pennies on the dollar in comparison to the cost of life and the cost it would impose on the American taxpayer to house these terrorists in maximum security prisons here in the United States of America. And I would echo the message of our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who expressed his gratitude to President Bukele and El Salvador's government for their cooperation in this deal. As for Russia,
El Salvador's just making a ton of money off that too. I mean, look, we're getting a deal. I'm not complaining by any means. I'm just saying, that guy's cleaning up. He's licking his chops because it ain't gonna cost $6 million to house those guys in freaking empty bunkers. I should say empty bunkers. There's a lot of gang members there, but to give them some rice and a little bit of meal ain't $6 million for the rest of those guys' lives. They ain't gonna be eating good. They ain't gonna see a lot of sunlight, and they ain't gonna have a lot of time to exercise. Let me tell you, that place is rough.
As you know, the president announced last night on Air Force One on his return from his very busy weekend in Florida that he will be speaking to President Putin tomorrow. I won't get ahead of those negotiations, but I can say we are on the 10th yard line of peace, and we've never been closer to a peace deal than we are in this moment. And the president, as you know, is determined to get one done. Sure, Caitlin.
I have two questions for you. One,
Folks, Caitlin's CNN. We don't like her.
the flights, but first on the president's post overnight, saying that the pardons that were issued by President Biden preemptively to members of the January 6th committee, that they're now null and void. Have attorneys here at the White House told President Trump that he has the legal authority to undo a pardon simply because it was signed by auto pen, as he said?
The president was begging the question that I think a lot of journalists in this room should be asking about whether or not the former president of the United States, who I think we can all finally agree was cognitively impaired. I know it took people some time to finally admit that, but we all know that to be true, as evidenced by his disastrous debate performance against President Trump during the campaign. I digress on that. But the president was raising the point that did the president...
I told you, just shadow, a little bit of shadow boxing, a little bit of light punches to the Caitlin's body. Just damn! Just that, then she's gonna go back and don't go. She's gonna come back again with a little bam. She's gonna come really quick. That's what she does.
Even know about these pardons? Was his legal signature used without his consent or knowledge? And that's not just the president or me raising those questions, Caitlin. According to the New York Post, there are Biden officials from the previous White House who raised those questions and wondered if the president was even consulted about his legally binding signature being signed onto documents. And so I think it's a question that everybody in this room should be looking into, because certainly that would propose perhaps criminal or illegal behavior if staff members were signing the President of the United States autograph without his consent.
Biden is on the record talking about issuing preemptive pardons to these people.
But was he
Somebody should tell Biden that, because I'm not so sure he knows that himself.
aware of his signature being used on every single pardon? That's a question you should ask the Biden
Is
White
there
House.
any evidence on that he wasn't aware of it?
You're a reporter. You should find out. Sean.
Boo, baby! To the people's elbow again, just... And here's Caitlin. Whoa, what happened?
Flights. So I have a question on the timeline of the flights. You keep talking about the judge's written order, which hit the docket Saturday night at about 7:26 p.m. But he issued a verbal order before that at about 6:45 and 6:48 p.m. based on the court hearing. A verbal order from the bench. Does the White House feel the need to comply with a verbal order from this judge?
Again, as I said, all of the planes subject to the written order of this judge departed U.S. soil, U.S. territory before the judge's written order.
But what about the verbal order, which of course carries the same legal weight as a written order, and said for the planes to turn around if they were
Well,
in the air?
there's actually questions about whether a verbal order carries the same weight as a legal order, as a written order, and our lawyers are determined to ask and answer those questions in court. Sean.
Hey, so on Friday, the president suggested at length that it should be illegal to criticize judges, but he has repeatedly criticized judges who rule against him, and Elon Musk is calling for impeachment of judges who have opposed the administration. So how are those two?
Did you see her reaction right here? I'm telling you, folks, you got to scan the crowd. Because these people, as rightfully noted in the chat, I see you, Patriots, I do read all of it. These people are activists, some of them. Some of them are journalists, like Philip Wegman. He's an actual journalist. Ed, right here with Fox Business, is a journalist. Watch right here, right in front of Natalie Winters, and right in front of the Daily Wire. This lady who I'm starting to like, Kara, I think her name is. I'm trying to learn. I'm going to go back. Watch your reaction. Watch it. Here we go.
Calling for impeachment of judges who have opposed the administration. So how are those two things not in conflict?
Did you catch
I
that?
have not heard the president talk about impeaching judges. I know you mentioned Mr. Musk's tweet, but I have not heard the president of the United States ask that. Mary.
Hey, thanks, Caroline. I wanted to ask about this video that I saw this morning set to the tune of, I believe, Closing Time, about deportations of illegal migrants. What's the strategy behind the White House's videos they've been putting out on this, and can you kind of talk us through the thinking on these videos?
Sure. I think the White House and our entire government clearly is leaning into the message of this president. And we are unafraid to double down and to take responsibility and ownership of the serious decisions that are being made. The president was elected with an overwhelming mandate to launch the largest mass deportation campaign in American history, and that's exactly what he is doing. And to this very day, we are now, I think, 56 or 7 days into the administration by my count. The president still receives an overwhelming public support for the policies that he is enacting. So we are unafraid to message effectively what the president is doing on a daily basis to make our communities safer. And the specific video you referenced, I think it sums up our immigration policy pretty well. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. I have two questions. First, will President Trump put sanctions on Russia if the talks on Tuesday don't go as hoped? And secondly, have any illegal immigrants self-deported through CBP home yet?
This is the problem with the media nowadays. And I guess the best analogy that I can connect this with is how they did it with Joey, but with FDR, right? With his lack of mobility, they were willing to cover it up because it didn't help showing that a president was weak, even if it's not his fault. In the same way here is that when you're in the midst of negotiation talks and there's people dying on the battlefield, maybe sometimes keep your questions to yourself. I don't know what it is with the people in this room, and I'm trying my best not to cuss because people are dying on both sides. I don't know what it is with these people that are trying to set this administration up, and currently right now with the mouthpiece of the leader of the free world, to say something that can ruin the negotiations. I don't know what it is with these people. I don't know if their heads are far up there, you know what's, or if that is their direction, is to take us into a World War III or escalate this stuff. But sometimes it's just good to just shut your mouth and not ask a certain question. Like the typical, does Donald Trump think that Vladimir Putin is a dictator? Does he think that Vladimir Putin is a murderer? Maybe save those questions after the negotiations, you idiots, so that we can bring peace here in the world and you don't escalate it on your behalf, because this is for everybody to see. Let's use this a little bit here and maybe save that for another time.
To your first question, it's something the president has floated, and certainly he's willing to do if necessary. I don't have anything to read out, and I would never get ahead of the president on such a serious decision. To your second question about the CBP Home app, I would have to check in with the Department of Homeland Security, but it's a great question, and we're very proud to repurpose this app, which the Biden administration abused to facilitate the mass illegal entry of illegal immigrants into our country. It was like a fast pass at Disneyland. That's not happening under this administration. We are encouraging illegal immigrants to actively self-deport to maybe save themselves from being in one of these fun videos.
Caroline.
Sure. John, good to see you.
After President Trump strafe-bombed the Houthis yesterday,
Yeah,
he said that if they retaliate, he was going to personally hold Iran accountable for that. Holding them accountable, what would that look like?
I got this one, Caroline. Okay. All hell's gonna break loose. You won't see. You're never gonna see anything like it. I'm gonna bring out the big guns. There's a bomb that everybody's heard of. Everybody loves it. It's called the mother of all bombs. We've dropped it in Afghanistan before in my first administration. In my first term, I got another doozy. I got one bigger than that. It's the mother of mothers of all bombs. And you're going to love it. Okay, Jeff? You're going to love it. We're going to drop it. And it's going to go kaboom. Sorry about that.
Well, I would defer you to what the president put out this morning, John, where he said very clearly, I will read it, "Let nobody be fooled. The hundreds of attacks being made by Houthi, the sinister mobsters and thugs based in Yemen, who are hated by the Yemeni people, are all created by Iran. Any further attack or retaliation by the Houthis will be met with great force, and there is no guarantee that the force will stop there. Iran has played the innocent victim of rogue terrorists from which they've lost control, but they haven't lost control. They are dictating every move, giving them the weapons, supplying them with money and highly sophisticated military equipment, and even so-called intelligence. Every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran. And Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences, and those consequences will be dire." That is a statement from the President of the United States just moments ago. I have nothing additional to share, but our message to Iran is you better take this president seriously, and I think the Houthis learned that the hard way this past weekend. As I said in my opening remarks, there's a new sheriff in town, and this president is not just going to sit on his hands and allow terrorists to launch attacks on commercial vessels and U.S. naval ships.
I really wish we can get Trump a sheriff badge now. Just to continue the political charades and the trolling of the progressive left. You know that they'll, don't even say anything. Just have him come out. He's walking to Marine One, with X by his side, skipping and prancing. McDonald! The funny thing is I would act the exact same way as X if I was next to Donald Trump. Whee! Yeah! What's up, suckers? I would do the same thing, but just put a badge on him. You know what I mean? A nice little sheriff, a plastic one. One you get at the 99-cent store. I know they're not around anymore. But just a nice little plastic badge for him, and just watch the left lose their minds. It would take hold of the media. How does he claim he's the sheriff of Washington, D.C.? That's not a thing. He didn't take the test. Freaking idiots. Should like the garbage truck, but do the badge.
Those actions will not be tolerated. Sure, Edward.
Yeah, thanks. Caroline, on the economy. So after mostly a down week last week in the economy, you've been very vocal, as well as other cabinet members, about how we're in a transition and about how this economic transition, and there's a plan, a long-term plan for tariffs on this. How concerned is the president that the markets and Americans, for lack of a better term, will freak out over these tariffs and be concerned about a long-term plan?
Sure.
We're going to pause here. For the last 3 White House press briefings, we've mentioned that she needs to meet with Stephen Miller and get a concrete plan here of how she's going to explain this to the American people in a simplified manner. And I said that Stephen Miller is very good at taking complicated and abstract concepts that people necessarily can't connect with or understand fully, not to any fault of their own, and package it in a way that's meaningful to the American people. I said this type of question was coming, and I know for a fact we've covered this in the Dark MAGA podcast because some of you were in the room with me in the chat when we were talking about it. Now's her time to shine. And I told you, whenever you watch the show, you are going to be 2, 3, sometimes a year ahead of the news cycle and certain questions in that room. We've been doing this for almost 5 years now. We know what to expect. We know how to answer this stuff. I hope she's ready. Now's her time.
I think I've been asked this question and answered this question respectfully, Edward. We are in a period of transition. The president has made that clear. He also has made his belief in tariffs and what they will do for our great country clear, restoring wealth back to our country. And if you look at the president's first-term economic formula, massive deregulation, tax cuts, lowering the cost of living with an energy boom, which the American people can expect soon. Wall Street and Main Street should both be assured by what President Trump did in his first term. It's the exact same formula. In fact, I would argue it's even better this time around. And if you look at some of the economic indicators in the last week, the latest CPI report last week beat expectations. Inflation is cooling. Core inflation dropped for the first time in 4 months. The national average of the price of gas is down 42 cents from 1 year ago. And there was also a new report out this morning about wholesale egg prices. They continue to fall. A dozen eggs are now $3.10 cheaper since January 24th. First, that's a 47% decrease overall. So I think the American people do have great reason to be optimistic about this economy. And as I've said repeatedly, it continues to be true. The administration has a whole of government effort to fix the economic mess created by Biden.
So the president's point.
That doesn't answer the question that Ed proposed. Look, and I told you guys I was going to hold them to the same fire that I held Karine Jean-Pierre and Jen Psaki and all the other ones. That's just not a good response, especially for how spooked the economy is right now. It's very volatile. It's going up and down, which you expect in the short term. All the things she just mentioned are in the short term right now. The question is what the long-term effects are, and you have to be able to package it in a way that the American people can understand. She doesn't need to say, this is now the 3rd or 4th time I've answered this question, especially when you are spoon-fed a question that you should know how to answer, as well as the fact that you're able to soften the blow of what's been going on in terms of the stock market for the last week or so. You're given multiple opportunities here. Your word carries weight. It could shift the market. Now was your time to shine. She didn't do a terrible job, but she also didn't do a good job. It was a mediocre answer to a question that was a layup, and she failed at it. I hate to say it, guys. She failed. I guess I give her a C. Okay, I give her a C. There you go. She didn't fail because I said she did mediocre. She needs to work on that big time. I don't know why this is slipping and not getting across.
Pointing to that April 2nd tariff deadline, so to speak, is the tariff back and forth sort of done now? We're just all looking towards April 2nd?
Well, I think the president would tell you that all options are always on the table, and he's always ready to respond if he feels the United States is being unfairly treated by our allies and also our competitors around the world. But yes, the April 2nd day is a big day for the country, as the president has said. Reciprocal tariffs will go into effect. We'll have more details on that as the date nears, but our entire trade team, Secretary Lutnick, Secretary Bessent, the vice president has been quite involved in these talks and discussions as well about what that will look like. And the president, as you always do, you will hear from him directly on it. Deborah Saunders, how are you?
Fine, how are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Former Pardon Attorney Elizabeth Warner believes she was fired for refusing to sign off on a move to restore gun rights to actor Mel Gibson. DOJ's Todd Blanche says no. But I want to know, is the administration dedicated to restoring gun rights to felons who served their times? I ask this because I've talked to people who were pardoned. They felt that was important. Of course, this isn't necessarily for a pardon, What is the president's thinking on this issue?
Sure.
After you've served your sentence, should you have gun rights?
It's an important question. It is one I have not spoken to the president about on his views, but I will take it to him this afternoon. I will tell him you asked, and we will get you an answer.
Actually, I don't even have an answer to that one. I think it depends just on the crime, right? That's what I think. You served your time, but man, usually I think she was talking about a felony, right? If I remember correctly. But if you have a felony, though, man, you did something not good. You did something really not good. I don't know if you can be trusted with a firearm, but that's a question I'll have to think about.
You're welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. A question for you regarding the administration complying with judges' orders. I want to ask about an administration spokesperson who's the border czar, Tom Homan. He was on Fox News.
We love Tom Homan.
And he was talking about the deportations, and he said the following. He said, "We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think," which seems to me, just reading that, that you don't care what orders come from the federal bench. Is that the case? Can you clarify that, please?
Well, I think since you just quoted Tom, I'll quote Tom. He said, "I don't care what the judges think, but I can assure you that the administration is complying with the court order. And as I've said repeatedly from this podium, all of the flights that were subject to the judge's written order departed before the written order, and we are prepared to make that case in court later this afternoon." Reagan.
And then if I could, on Russia, the president, as you pointed out, Caroline, made some remarks on Air Force One coming back from Florida, and he seemed to indicate that the conversation tomorrow concerns essentially dividing up assets, dividing up territory associated with the war in Ukraine. Has President Zelensky given President Trump that authority? Is that what is going to take place tomorrow?
Well, as you know, the president and his entire national security team have been engaged directly with President Zelensky and the Ukrainian team, and that has been part of the discussion between the president's team and the Ukrainians. As for where those lines will be drawn or any specifics, I am not going to get into that from this podium. It would be unwise for me to get ahead of the president's call with President Putin tomorrow. But again, I can assure you, in the effort of transparency, as this president always does, you will hear from him or one of us directly after that phone call tomorrow. Reagan.
Thank you, Caroline. There's a lot of focus on the judicial branch right now. The president has about 40 judicial appointments that he could make at this moment. Do you have an update on what the timeline would look like for those judicial appointments? And does the president have a list of potential nominees that he's vetting?
I do not have an update on a timeline, nor do I have a list, but I can certainly have our team gather that for you and provide it. You're welcome. Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline.
Sure.
Thank you, Caroline.
Go
So
ahead.
the president is visiting the Kennedy Center this afternoon to attend a board meeting. A question about what happened a few weeks ago. The Kennedy Center got bomb threats targeting a performance by Shingyun Performing Arts, which is an American company showcasing China before communism. This company has been targeted, unfortunately, by the CCP for years. I'm wondering if this administration has a response to this, and also as the president is putting an emphasis on arts and culture, what's the administration's message to potentially foreign state actors who are trying to disrupt that in the U.S.?
Don't disrupt it. This administration will take that very seriously and hold you accountable. We obviously condemn any violence or threats of violence against American institutions. And the president will be traveling to the Kennedy Center later this afternoon. I look forward to going with him. As you know, he is now the chairman of the board of the Kennedy Center, where he hopes to restore arts and culture that embrace American tradition, don't disparage it, as we have unfortunately seen over the past several years. The president will be doing a tour of the center. In his business developer mind, I'm sure he will make some recommendations on how the center itself can be improved, but also we'll be discussing perhaps some future plays and musicals and theatrical programs that the center will be hosting under his new leadership and the board's new leadership. Daniel.
Will the president be discussing with Putin tomorrow the future of Volodymyr Zelensky, sort of a follow-up to John's question?
Again, I've been asked and answered this question now. I'm not going to get ahead of the president's discussion tomorrow, but after the phone call takes place, I can certainly provide a readout. Daniel.
Caroline, thank you so much. You mentioned earlier in the briefing that you guys are at the 10-yard line of peace. Given the amount of progress that you've made in such a short amount of time, is that an indictment of the previous administration's foreign policy stance? And is it just more proof that you need to talk to people to sort of get things done?
I think so. I think the previous administration is the reason this war began. As President Trump often says, this war would have never started if he were still in office. It only started because of the incompetence and the weakness of the previous administration. And President Trump is very proud of the progress that he and his team have made in such a short amount of time. And hopefully tomorrow that progress will move forward. Sure.
Thanks. There have been some media reports just in the last few hours that the administration has decided to withdraw from the International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine, which is designed to hold Putin accountable for war crimes. Are you able to confirm that? And if that has occurred, why has that occurred?
I'm not able to confirm it because I have not heard that. I will caution, I know there have been many inaccurate and misleading reports from Reuters lately, so I would caution anybody taking that seriously, but I can check in and get back to you. Rachel.
Thanks, Caroline. Is it the president's belief that the Justice Department should be investigating members of the January 6th Select Committee? Is he directing the DOJ to do that?
As the president made it very clear in his address on Friday, I believe some of you were there, I was there, he made his vision for what he would like to see of the Department of Justice very clear, but he said that he has appointed great people in Attorney General Pam Bondi and also in our FBI Director Kash Patel to do what they think is best for our justice system and to stop the weaponization of justice that we saw under the previous administration against not just President Trump but his supporters as well. We want to restore the Department of Justice to an institution that focuses on fighting law and order and crime and putting real criminals behind bars, not targeting Americans because of their religion or their political speech. We saw that under the previous administration,
Correct.
and it's unacceptable to this president.
And just to follow up really quickly on just Homan's comments from earlier, a few weeks ago in the Oval Office, the president said he will always abide by the courts. We heard what Tom Homan said earlier today. So I'm only asking just to be clear for the American people, it is the administration's belief that that you feel like you are bound to comply by the judge's orders?
We are complying with the judge's orders.
Question on this.
Again, I'm going to reiterate this. I find it astonishing that, and rightfully so, they should do this, trying to hold the president accountable, but not the people that came here illegally. I find it fascinating that, again, the questions are all geared towards, well, is he following the rule of law? Is Donald Trump doing what he's supposed to be doing? But why is that same question not being proposed to these violent illegal immigrants? It should be. Why are you not concerned about that? Why are you not investigating and talking to these violent gang members? It's a good question that should be proposed and answered, but we'll never get it.
Sure.
What role does the president see for FEMA with these storms? He's talking about getting rid of FEMA, states handling their own disasters. Does he plan to change how the federal government responds to these storms?
There hasn't been a change yet. That doesn't mean there couldn't be in the future. But as of right now, the president, the entire administration are actively monitoring the storms, as I said. In fact, before I came down here, there was an email note in my inbox from the Department of Homeland Security on what they are actually doing state by state across the board. So rest assured, Secretary Noem and her team is on it, and I would defer you to the Department of Homeland Security for any further details.
One more question. The president referenced power plants with a conversation with Vladimir Putin. What is he referring to with power plants? What is that?
There's a power plant that is on the border of Russia and Ukraine that was up for discussion with the Ukrainians, and he will address it in his call with Putin tomorrow.
The nuclear plant.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Caroline?
Do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you if you would be releasing more granular data about the people who were sent to El Salvador this week. Particularly, will you be releasing their names?
I don't believe so because of the privacy concerns at this point in time. That doesn't mean we won't eventually. I would defer you to the Department of Homeland Security for more details on the individuals on the flights, but we have been incredibly transparent in giving you the breakdown of the numbers and also some of the crimes committed by these heinous criminals and individuals: kidnapping, sexual abuse of a child, robbery, aggravated assault on a police officer. I would remind everybody in this room that Tren de Aragua is a foreign terrorist organization operating within the United States of America because the previous administration allowed them to invade our country. These are monsters who tortured, raped, and murdered a 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungre. They murdered 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley. They led a multi-state sex trafficking operation involving smuggling women into the United States. holding them in stash houses in Louisiana, Florida, New Jersey, Texas, and Virginia, and forcing them into prostitution. They kidnapped and murdered a 33-year-old woman in Texas. They sexually and physically assaulted a woman and her daughter in Wisconsin. They conducted a mass shooting in Illinois. They peddled untraceable ghost guns across New York City, took over an Aurora, Colorado apartment complex where they kidnapped and tortured victims. And by the way, many of you in the mainstream media said that didn't happen. It turned out that it did. And because of the effective immigration policies of this administration, those foreign terrorists were detained and they are no longer operating on American soil. And we have President Trump to thank for that. We'll see you guys later at the Kennedy Center. Thanks so much.
Dang. Good briefing, not bad. Had a minor slip up with explaining tariffs and how the outgrowths of that in a long-term way should refrain from making the American people a little less shaky. Something to work on. Hopefully she does. But again, I want to go back to this idea of, well, are you going to release the names of the people that were deported? Well, you know, if we're going to release their names, I think we should release the names of those that stole all our Social Security money, those that are claiming to be 360 years old. And also, I want the names released to those that thought it was a good idea to send $59 million worth of condoms, allegedly, to Mozambique. I don't give two bleeps if they're Republican, Democrat. I don't care who they are or where they're from. I want them out. Easy. Or you pay back the $59 million, which I know the person doesn't have most likely, but I want all those names released, and I want to make sure that we don't vote for them again. Now, you know, Democrats, you know they're going to vote for them again. But if it's a Republican that did that stuff, I would more or less like to call them out here on the show so that we don't vote for them again and then get their hell out of office really quick and stop wasting our money. Because if they're willing to do it once, they're more willing to do it again, folks. Clear and present danger departed. Exactly. Glad that they're gone. Jeff says, are they talking about the Chernobyl plant on the Russia-Ukraine border? Maybe, but I know they said nuclear power, so we'll see. Raymond says she is so much better than Bozo the Clown. Absolutely correct. Beth says, great, acknowledging how much that has progressed so far. Absolutely correct. We got what you meant, A to Z. We know that you meant deported. We got to be careful saying words like that because YouTube doesn't like it. You know that we do a morning show, folks. Would love for you to join us nonetheless. We did actually scratch the surface of 80,000 subscribers, but now we dipped slightly below. The goal is 100,000 this year, and I'm very confident that we will make that goal before the end of the year for sure. Was hoping things would change with YouTube, but it looks like that's not going to be the case. It's going to be an uphill battle. No matter how many subscribers we get, we are being throttled. And so I ask you to join us over on Rumble if you can, folks. Screw YouTube. We will stay over at YouTube, but that platform is not doing anything for us. And so I would love your help over at Rumble. And if you're not over at Rumble, then you're more than welcome to check us out on Twitter, as well as known as X, and TikTok as well. But YouTube is really, really throttling us, folks. They are not willing to send out any of my videos at all, like at all. So appreciate you. And the only reason, by the way, we're getting subscribers, folks, just so if you're curious, is that we're paying YouTube literally to do it, basically. We're running ads. That's the only way. They are not going to pump out my videos organically. They're not going to show them to people. They're not going to send it out. They haven't been. They're not going to. They haven't done so in 4 years. I don't expect anything to change. So with that being said, we're going to bounce out of here. We've been streaming for an hour. I wanted to cover the White House press briefing with y'all. I got some show prep and a few other things to do before we head to dinner and all that other stuff. So hit that like and subscribe button if you feel like we deserved it. Definitely hit that like button. Leave us a comment down below when this video ends. And folks, we'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early here on The Bald Brad Show. Take care, Patriots.